718 days ago, so close to the 2-year mark at this point, which is actually when this video would have been planned to go out had we not had something else in the pocket to celebrate the 2-year point of Warzone coming up. But 718 days ago, we got that countdown timer as the 4th sliver or blade of Modern Warfare's main menu unlocked, that then turned into Call of Duty Warzone. For months, the prospect of a Battle Royale game had become greater and greater in terms of reality, as we saw from the very launch of the game that the world of Spec Ops shared so many mechanics that would make a perfect transition to a large world Battle Royale, but then we learned about so much actually added in behind the scenes that would make this a reality. Then, it finally happened. Today, we're taking a look back at Verdansk Day 1, looking back at the origins of our first introductions into Verdansk, and some of what for many made such a special time in gaming. As we go along, let me know your thoughts down below. Did you enjoy Verdansk Day 1? Were you among the millions to jump into the action right at the beginning? Do you miss it at all? If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, drop a like on the video as well. This is something that's a bit different from what you may be used to seeing here on the channel, but especially when things are dry and there's not a whole ton of new things going on in the Call of Duty space, deep dives like this to reminisce are some of my favorite videos to make, so I do hope that you enjoy this one as well. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button if you guys would like to see more deep dives like this. You'd like to stay up to date with any and everything Call of Duty, from updates and news to loadouts and tips and tricks, as well as everything in between. I'd love to have you in the community. That said, let's jump into it. Warzone's launch will always be a moment in my gaming life where I'll remember it. From the franchise that I grew up on, to have something that was unheard of as of free-to-play for as long as we could remember, especially at that point, to grant a free-to-play game to players on the most anticipated title of the last decade or so, it was that moment of, oh, this is gonna be big. And it was. I mean, Warzone reached heights that Call of Duty never had beforehand, and it was something that catapulted Call of Duty back into the mainstream in terms of gaming discussion. But that launch is one that I will always remember, and some of the good times I had stemming from that can't ever be replaced. On a more whimsical note, though, the one thing that I will always remember also from this is that on March 8th, the final day where we couldn't talk about anything Warzone related, for those that were at a capture session early, it was that final day of keeping up the facade of, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen, we'll see. Someone reamed into me in my comments with something along the lines of, how dare you keep talking about these rumors? They will never, ever, ever, ever release a free-to-play Battle Royale. This is all made up for views. You're just making yourself look bad. And I couldn't help but just laugh hysterically at it, because I was like, dude, I so badly just want to tell you everything that's happening. But we had Warzone in this new world of Verdansk right at our fingertips. For whatever reason, that comment will always be cemented in my memory as well. But I mean, it was right there. And we knew what was coming, but probably not the scale at which it was going to be, the impact it would make in the franchise. To understand Verdansk at its core, we kind of have to look back before that, before the March 10th release exactly. In fact, let's flash back 137 days before that. 4 months and 14 days before March 10th, and you're looking at Modern Warfare's release date, where a new campaign, multiplayer, and even Spec Ops took hold of the gaming audience and industry. The beloved Captain Price made a return to start the building blocks of the legendary Team 141 that we'd see come to completion by the year's end. Spec Ops was, at the start, wasn't something that was really the best laid plans of content. Its offering was limited to begin with, it had limited replayability as well, and honestly was almost unplayable in 2 senses. Number 1, it was incredibly hard. Like, the AI was turned up to veteran level bots at 11 out of 10, and there was a severe lack of resources around the world like armor plates to be found. So you'd have to be incredibly tactical with your team to infiltrate the initial mission bases and then complete the missions without dying, which, not to mention, even if you did, number 2, there was a high chance the game would bug out and not let you complete that mission. I remember the very first time we ended up playing this, it was about a week before the launch of Modern Warfare. Myself and a bunch of other creators were out at a pre-release capture session gathering footage of everything to create content leading up to the launch, and my initial Spec Ops group was Inkslasher, Exclusive Ace, one of the heads of PR for Call of Duty filling in, and myself. The moment that we booted up and saw the world, especially the respawning drop sequence, I turned to him and said, so you're telling me this wouldn't be great for a Battle Royale mode? But during that play session, coming back to it, we ended up doing that airport mission where you infiltrate, get the intel, then go through the Mile High Club mission from COD 4 recreated, jump out of the plane with a nuclear core, and extract. Well, the plane closed on us before we were all inside of it, which I think is actually still an issue to this day, but when we got the core, it wasn't even in our inventories. It instead was 100 meters under the ground, so we literally couldn't finish the mission. Stuff like that plagued Spec Ops for a long while, and again, even still does to this day, but I firmly believe that looking back on it, Spec Ops was never really meant to be the focus here, that it was marketed as a mode that was able to push sales and everything and be the sort of front for that third mode, but it was kind of what was going on behind the scenes that was more important here, to build the foundation of Warzone, to build the foundation of a new mode and a world there setting it all up. So that's where we can kind of fast forward again. Verdansk was brand new in many ways to new players, but familiar in some regards to others as well. From ground war, we learned about the locations of Karst River Quarry, Tvorsk District or downtown, Kravnik Farmland, the port of Verdansk, as well as Zokov Boneyard by the time that Warzone launched. Mix that in with the Spec Ops missions and the locations and locale that we had at that point around Verdansk, and you already had a relatively robust understanding of the world around us, but not filled out to the extent of complete and total exploration where you could look in every single building, you could get on every rooftop, and the potential for gunfights everywhere. From dam to prison, farms to outskirts of the airport, you could land, loot, and fight, maybe even explore a bit. From the very beginning, we even saw Infinity Ward's seeds of the storyline were placed in plain sight with things that we saw initially from bunkers, telephones, and laptops scattered around the world with no real access point to those just yet. That was something that was the start of one of the coolest Easter eggs and progressive Easter eggs that we saw introduce some major story elements once it was completed. But at that time, we only had the starting pieces in our curiosity as to what it would mean. It wasn't until a few months later that we'd end up finding out that there was a nuke inside those bunkers, and half a year later, we end up finding that it was the final piece to the Modern Warfare 2019 storyline, stopping Zakhaev's plan to enact World War III. Now, Verdansk Day 1 was a bit different landscape and gameplay wise. Basically everything that you see now with gameplay from either your own gameplay to some of your favorite creators, the best pros in the scene, it was nothing like this. I consistently look back and just see how slow my matches were. The pacing was incredibly different. Even some of the most basic settings and strategies, I didn't even utilize day one initially. It was actually added in as of day one here for Verdansk and Warzone, but the square minimap with rotation enabled wasn't something that was actually there beforehand. This is something that even in some of my first gameplays, I didn't utilize. I still had that circular minimap, which only hindered my own gameplay. It didn't give me as much area covered in what I could see on that minimap. Probably the biggest system shock, though, even at its base, was that Warzone launched as trios only. You could only roam Verdansk in a squad of 3. There was no solos, duos, or quads playlist when it launched, and Warzone was, for the first couple of days to weeks, only playable in trios. Personally, looking back, I think that was meant to just be a stability thing, making sure the game was able to hold up the player counts and that player load per match. But also looking back, you could definitely tell the game was built for trios in mind. It's consistently what I think is probably one of the most consistent pacings to have in Warzone's offering, and that's coming from somebody that plays in a full 4 squad. Trios just seems like what the game was built on, and being that it launched with it, makes sense. Gunplay and gun choicing wise, man, oh man, we really shouldn't expose my day one builds because they're almost shameful to a point, but the nice part was that at this point with day one, Verdansk day one, no one really knew what they were doing. No one had any significant upper hand in gunfights. The only truly broken thing in gunfights where if you had a rocket launcher, mainly an RPG, those were actually one-hit kills guaranteed during the first few weeks of Warzone before they patched that. In fact, before we talk about more weaponry choices, for the beginning of Warzone, kill credit wasn't even granted to the player that downed an enemy. It was whoever cleaned up the kill whenever they were downed. So you could easily cheese kills off your squad and troll them if you wanted, but weaponry-wise, this is what I'd recommended 5 days after the launch of Warzone when I put up my first Warzone loadout video. A thermal HDR, a no-stock M4A1. In some gameplays at launch, I even rocked a standard 30-round magazine with no optic, which I got no idea what I was doing there. An AUG with 5.56 rounds, a RAM 7, an EBR with a hybrid thermal sight, and an Odin with minimal recoil mitigation attachments. The landscape was so different here. But in my defense, the EBR had a blueprint at that time that was bugged and offered more damage. It was a 2-hit kill guaranteed, I think. The AUG 5.56 offered more damage per round as it was 5.56 ammo, what rifles would be using, but with the mobility of an SMG. The Odin, yeah, I don't know what I was doing with that one. The no-stock M4A1, bro, I died on that hill for so long because it was but better movement with no stock. Meanwhile, this was all pre-slide canceling, which, by the way, that wasn't a thing. Slide canceling and almost all your movement you may see now as commonplace didn't really exist back then. Nobody really knew what cameraing was, breaking camera angles and things like that. Nobody really picked up on those things to the degree that they're used right now. You'd see a ton of people running through open fields, just normal sprinting around after the tac sprint finished up. Hot drops weren't really a thing for the first few weeks to a couple of months, which was definitely cool cool as well. By the time Verdansk finished up, everyone knew the drops. If you wanted to go in hot, have action right off the rip, you almost always landed Superstore, and you almost always had a rotation to do so through there. But on day one, you had free reign. Nobody knew where the good drop spots were. Hell, my squad even landed exclusively hills for the longest time. Yeah, I'm talking hills south of Promenade near the edge of the map, and we were like, yo, this is the spot. And it's hilarious to me just how much has changed from day one strats that we had and everybody else may have had to where we are now. Through Verdansk, through Verdansk 84, through Caldera. So other things that may surprise you when you look back on Verdansk day one. Cash drops were way more abundant. Buy stations were a little bit different. The UI was a little bit less intuitive for what it's worth. Loadout drops only cost $6,000. Imagine that now. Buybacks were 4,500 instead of 4,000. Shield turrets were a thing in the buy stations. Because nobody really had any proper loadouts, nobody really prioritized silencers or the monolithic suppressors in a lot of cases, you'd see a ton of red dots on the minimap if you were in close enough vicinity. But there was a lot different that was just an entirely different product of the timing in the gaming space. Not as much time to learn and master what we had. Meanwhile, now there's hundreds of days played from some of your favorite streamers. But really, it comes down to this was just the lightning in a bottle. Right thing, right time. This was right before everything shut down for the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of people then had a ton of free time. They were staying indoors. Tons of people took up gaming as a hobby to pass the time. And Warzone was that thing that was free to play, released right at that perfect time and at the height of Call of Duty with some of the best systems that we had seen at the time, with some of the best and most captivating eras, storyline, and everything like that, and a battle royale craze that still is absolutely dominating the gaming market. The appeal of all of this, and as something that was truly new to the Call of Duty formula, mixed with a great universe being built out, it made for something that just can't be replicated. Verdansk Day 1 will always hold a special place in my heart, Warzone's launch, and it was one of those things that, as a creator, having so much on offer from Modern Warfare's multiplayer, a storyline and a universe there, to then something free to play, opening up to a vast market of new players and new friends to be made here through helpful guides, tutorials, and all that kind of stuff. I'm always haunted by the Andy Bernard office quote of, I wish there was a way to know that you were in the good old days before you left them. And to me, while I'm always looking forward to what's next, and while I think that there's always an opportunity to have something do well and that there's always positive at the end of the tunnel, it is definitely a time where I didn't realize how fun it was at that point. I didn't realize how much fun I was having with my friends gaming and how much from Verdansk Day 1 would stem out of that, both in just an enjoyment level, but also in a career level as well. I didn't know it was right around the corner for any of that. And so looking back, Verdansk Day 1 absolutely holds a special place in my heart. And as we near the 2-year mark now for Warzone, I want to take a look back and talk a little bit about some of that experience. So love to hear your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of Verdansk Day 1? Do you guys remember it like it was yesterday? Did you guys like it more than Caldera, what we have now? Whatever the case, drop it down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you enjoyed this deep dive, this kind of retrospective look back at Warzone and the launch here of it, if you enjoyed it at all, do me a favor, drop a like on the video. If you're new to the channel as well, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Warzone, Vanguard, anything COD related, we got you covered here on the channel. So if you guys would like to join the community, I'd love to have you. But that said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.